My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I never planned on buying my mother-in-law's company. The first time I met Eleanor Thompson, she looked me up and down with those steel blue eyes that seemed to catalog every flaw. We were at La Maison, an upscale, French restaurant with crisp white tablecloths and waiters who moved like ghosts between tables. "So, you work in corporate finance?" she asked, her voice dripping with the same disdain she might use when finding a stain on her silk blouse. I nodded, trying to keep my smile in place as I explained my role as a financial analyst. "At Dataworth Investments," I added, hoping the name of the respected firm might impress her. Eleanor's perfectly manicured fingers tapped against her water glass. "A starter position, I assume." Before I could correct her, I'd recently been promoted to senior analyst, she continued. "That dress? Macy's?" The way she said it made the department store sound like a discount bin at a garage sale. I felt my cheeks warm but kept my composure. "It's actually from Nordstrom." David, my boyfriend of 8 months and her only son, had excused himself to take a work call moments before, leaving me alone with Eleanor for the first time. She leaned forward slightly, her diamond earrings catching the light. "Let me give you some advice, Sarah. My son is a Thompson. He needs someone with connections, with breeding, with a future." Her eyes narrowed as she delivered the blow. "You'll never be good enough for him." The words hit me like ice water. I opened my mouth to respond when David returned, oblivious to the tension crackling between us. "Sorry about that," he said, kissing my cheek before sitting down. "Mom, I hope you've been getting to know Sarah." Eleanor's face transformed instantly into a warm smile. "Of course, darling. We were just having a lovely chat about her career." That night, I lay awake replaying her words, the dismissal in her eyes. I curled closer to David's sleeping form, wondering if she was right. By morning, though, a different feeling had replaced the hurt: determination. Eleanor Thompson had no idea who she was dealing with. I wouldn't just prove I was good enough for her son. I'd show her I was someone to be reckoned with. I met David Thompson during my final year at Princeton. We were both in an advanced economics seminar, and I consistently outperformed him, something he found both frustrating and fascinating. "How do you always know which variables matter?" he asked after class one day, his genuine curiosity breaking through his privileged confidence. What David didn't know was that I'd worked harder than anyone to be in that classroom. My mother had raised me alone after my father left when I was 4. She juggled 3 jobs, waitressing, administrative work, and weekend retail, to keep a roof over our heads. I'd worked every summer since I was 14, earned a partial scholarship, and took out loans for the rest. Every economic theory had real-world applications in my life. Money wasn't abstract when you've watched your mother count pennies at the grocery store. Our relationship developed quickly. David was charming, kind, and unlike many of his wealthy peers, seemed to value my perspective. "You see things differently," he told me one night as we studied late in the library. "I've been taught to look at business like a game of chess. You see it like a battlefield." I didn't realize then how prophetic those words would be. The first time David took me to the Thompson estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, I felt like I'd stepped onto a movie set. Manicured gardens surrounded the colonial mansion with its white columns and perfect symmetry. Inside, original artwork hung on walls and furniture that belonged in museums sat casually arranged in rooms larger than the apartment I shared with 2 roommates. Eleanor Thompson greeted me with a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "So lovely to finally meet you," she said, air kissing near my cheeks. "David has been quite mysterious about you." That first dinner was an interrogation disguised as polite conversation. "And what does your father do?" Eleanor asked, knowing from David that my father wasn't in the picture. "My mother was my only parent," I replied evenly. "She worked in administrative services." I didn't mention the waitressing or retail jobs. "How resourceful of her," Eleanor responded. "The Thompson family has been in luxury design for 3 generations. Arthur's grandfather started with a single showroom in Manhattan. Arthur, David's father, seemed kinder than his wife, occasionally steering the conversation to more neutral territory when Eleanor's questions became too pointed. When David proposed 6 months later, I said yes without hesitation. I loved him, completely. The engagement party at the Thompson estate should have been a warning. Eleanor had taken control of every detail, from the guest list heavily weighted with Thompson connections to the menu featuring inside jokes from David's childhood that excluded me. While getting a fresh drink, I overheard Eleanor telling her, "Friend Margot, it's a phase. David always had a thing for rescuing strays." Before I could process this, she accidentally bumped into me, spilling red wine down the front of my dress. "Oh dear," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "White is so impractical, isn't it?" The wedding planning became a battleground. Eleanor vetoed my first choice of venue, too urban, my preferred florist. They did the Henderson wedding, and it was a disaster. And even had opinions about my dress. "Something sleeved would be more appropriate for your figure, dear." David consistently played peacemaker. "Mom just wants the best for us," he'd say. "It's easier if we compromise." Each time I gave in, a little piece of my resolve chipped away. On our wedding day, I discovered the errors in the seating chart that separated my college friends and placed my mother at a back table. The flowers were predominantly orchids, which I'd specifically said I didn't want because they reminded me of funerals, rather than the garden roses I'd chosen. But looking at David waiting for me at the altar, his face lighting up when he saw me, I pushed aside my frustration. I was marrying the man I loved. Eleanor would eventually come around when she saw how happy I made her son. I was determined to make this marriage work, despite my new mother-in-law. The first year of marriage brought the full force of Eleanor's interference. She began dropping by our brownstone unannounced, usually when she knew I'd be at work. "I thought your kitchen could use some organization," she'd say, showing David how she'd rearranged our cabinets. Or, "These throw pillows work much better with your sofa, don't you think?" Our personal space was being systematically redesigned in Eleanor's image. The first Thanksgiving in our home became the template for future holidays. I'd spent days preparing, using recipes passed down from my mother and grandmother. When Eleanor arrived, she carried 3 large shopping bags. "I brought a few essentials," she announced, pulling out containers of cranberry sauce, stuffing, and a small turkey. "Just in case." The implication was clear. My cooking couldn't be trusted. David didn't see the problem. "Mom's just trying to help," he said when I confronted him later. "Her stuffing recipe has been in the family for generations." Christmas was worse. Eleanor's gifts to me were always slightly off. A dress 1 size too small, a cookbook for beginners when she knew I loved cooking, a self-help book about career, advancement with the inscription, "Something to aspire to." Each present felt like a paper cut, small but stinging. Meanwhile, she regaled us with Thompson family Christmas traditions, stories, and inside jokes that deliberately excluded me. "Remember when David was 7 and got up at 4 a.m. to open presents?" she'd say to Arthur. "He was always so impatient." Then turning to me. Of course, in some families, Christmas is just about the gifts rather than the meaning behind them. When I received a significant promotion at work, Eleanor dismissed it during Sunday dinner. "That's nice, dear. Though in this economy, they're probably just trying to avoid hiring someone with more experience." David's response was always the same. "That's just how Mom is." She doesn't mean anything by it, but she did mean it, and her campaign against me was escalating. During a summer garden party at the Thompson estate, I overheard Eleanor on the phone in the kitchen. "No, Margot, I don't think it will last another year. David's beginning to see she doesn't fit into our world. Once the novelty wears off, he'll come to his senses." I decided enough was enough. That evening, I tried to establish boundaries. "Eleanor," I said carefully when we had a moment alone, "I feel that sometimes your comments about my background and choices are hurtful." Her face transformed instantly, her eyes filled with tears, and her lower lip trembled. "After everything I've done to welcome you into our family," she whispered. When David found us, all he saw was his mother crying, and me standing there looking guilty. "What did you say to her?" he demanded later that night. "I can't believe you'd attack my mother like that." I tried explaining, but David wasn't listening. "She's always been supportive of us," he insisted. "You're being oversensitive." That night, lying awake next to my sleeping husband, I felt more alone than ever. Maybe Eleanor was right. Maybe I didn't belong in this world. Maybe I wasn't good enough for David after all. The thought kept me awake until dawn, a kernel of doubt taking root in my mind. My job at Dataworth Investments involved analyzing potential acquisition targets and distressed businesses with turnaround potential. During a Monday morning meeting, my team was reviewing a list of struggling luxury brands when a familiar name caught my eye: Thompson Luxury Interiors. I struggled to keep my expression neutral as my colleague Ryan summarized the company's situation. 40 years in business, once the go-to designer for Manhattan's elite, but they've had 3 consecutive years of declining revenue. They're still coasting on reputation, but their business model is outdated, and they're hemorrhaging clients to more contemporary firms. My personal feelings aside, my professional interest was piqued. I stayed late that evening researching everything I could about my mother-in-law's company. The Thompson name had once been synonymous with classic luxury interior design. Eleanor had taken over from Arthur's father 30 years ago and had initially grown the business. Recent years, however, told a different story. Financial reports revealed mounting debt, declining client retention, and a failure to adapt to changing market trends. 3 designers had left in the past year alone. There was potential there, the brand still had value, but the company needed a complete overhaul. Coincidentally, the next day I had lunch with a client who mentioned they'd recently backed out of a contract with Thompson Luxury Interiors. Eleanor Thompson refuses to embrace digital design tools, my client complained. Everything is still done by hand, which extends the timeline by months, and her taste is stuck in the last century. All heavy drapes and mahogany when everyone wants open, sustainable spaces now. I asked careful questions about what would have made them stay with the company. Their answers confirmed my analysis. Thompson Interiors needed modern project management, updated design aesthetics, and a digital presence. That evening, I tentatively raised the subject with David. I heard Thompson Interiors might be facing some challenges, I began carefully. David frowned. Where did you hear that? I explained about the meeting, but emphasized it was public financial information. Your mother has built an amazing brand, I said sincerely, but the market has changed. I could offer some suggestions based on what I'm seeing in successful design firms. David's expression hardened. Mom's been running that company since before you were born, Sarah. She knows what she's doing. His dismissive tone stung. Besides, he continued, any problems are temporary. The Thompson name means something in this industry. I dropped the subject, but the seed of an idea had been planted. If Eleanor wouldn't accept me as family, perhaps there was another way to earn her respect. Business was a language we both understood. The thought flickered briefly. What if I could help save her company? Not for her sake, but to prove my value. In terms she couldn't dismiss. The idea followed me through the next few days, evolving and taking shape. I found myself analyzing Thompson Interiors not just as my mother-in-law's company, but as a potential business opportunity. If Eleanor couldn't see my worth as a daughter-in-law, maybe she would recognize my skills as a businesswoman. The quarterly Thompson family dinner was a tradition I'd come to dread. Held at the estate with extended family and close friends, it was Eleanor's stage to showcase her perfect family and to subtly undermine me. I prepared meticulously for this particular evening, choosing a conservative navy dress and pearl earrings that even Eleanor couldn't critique. I arrived with David, smiling and determined to maintain peace. Sarah, you look appropriate, Eleanor greeted me, which from her was almost a compliment. The first hour passed pleasantly enough. I chatted with Arthur about his golf game and exchanged recipes with David's Aunt Patricia. Eleanor was in her element, discussing a new client she claimed to have secured. The Astor's Manhattan penthouse, a complete redesign. I later learned this was entirely fabricated. During the main course, the conversation turned to business and the economy. Arthur mentioned a report about luxury markets weathering the economic downturn. Certain segments are doing well, I offered carefully, though customer expectations are evolving rapidly in the digital age. Eleanor's head snapped up. What would someone like you know about luxury markets? The table fell silent. I kept my voice steady. It's part of my job to analyze various sectors, including luxury goods and services. Eleanor's smile was arctic. Analysis from behind a desk is hardly the same as 30 years of experience, dear. I nodded, trying to diffuse the tension. Course not, I just find it interesting how digital integration is becoming essential even in traditional luxury spaces. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Thompson Interiors doesn't need to chase trends. Quality and tradition are timeless. I should have stopped there, but I made the mistake of adding, adapting to new technologies doesn't mean sacrificing quality. It can enhance the client experience. Eleanor set down her fork with deliberate precision. Let me be clear, Sarah. You may have married into this family, but you don't understand our world. My company has served the elite for decades. We don't need advice from someone who grew up shopping at outlet malls. I felt every eye at the table on me as she continued. You'll never be good enough for this family, and you certainly aren't qualified to comment on my business. The silence that followed was deafening. David, seated beside me, shifted uncomfortably but said nothing beyond a weak, "Mother, please, not now." No one else spoke up. Arthur looked down at his plate. David's cousins suddenly found their wine glasses fascinating. The remainder of the dinner passed in excruciating politeness, with conversation carefully steered to neutral topics. In the car afterward, I finally broke. You let her humiliate me in front of your entire family, I said to David, tears threatening. She basically called me trash, and you said nothing. David sighed. You know how she gets when anyone mentions the business. She's been stressed about it lately. I stared at him in disbelief. That's your response? To excuse her behavior? He gripped the steering wheel tighter. What do you want me to do, Sarah? She's my mother. And I'm your wife, I countered. You promised to stand by me, but every time Eleanor attacks me, you look the other way. The rest of the drive passed in silence. At home, David retreated to the guest room, claiming he needed space. I lay awake all night, Eleanor's words echoing in my mind. You'll never be good enough. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was fooling myself thinking I belonged in David's world. By morning, something had shifted inside me. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, eyes red from lack of sleep, and had an epiphany. I didn't need Eleanor's approval to know my worth. I was good enough. More than good enough. I'd worked my way through college, secured a position at a prestigious firm, and excelled there. If Eleanor couldn't see my value as family, perhaps she would understand the language of business. In that moment, a plan began to crystallize. I didn't need to win Eleanor's approval. I needed to earn her respect. And in the business world, respect came from power and results. The following week, I threw myself into researching Thompson Luxury Interiors with a new purpose. I requested every public filing, analyzed their client portfolio, and studied their competition. The picture was worse than I initially thought. Beyond the declining revenue, there were tax liens, late vendor payments, and a significant bank loan coming due in 6 months. I contacted former Thompson employees through LinkedIn, framing my questions as market research. The pattern was clear. Eleanor rejected technology, refused to update design aesthetics, and treated staff autocratically. One former designer told me, working there was like being trapped in 1995. We lost the Hamilton account, a $3 million project, because Eleanor insisted on hand-drawn sketches when they specifically requested 3D digital renderings. I arranged coffee with my former business school professor and mentor, Dr. Lillian Chen. I'm considering acquiring a distressed luxury design firm, I explained without mentioning names. The brand has value, but the leadership is resistant to necessary changes. Lillian listened carefully before asking the question that would shape everything that followed. Are you thinking of a hostile takeover or a stealth acquisition? That evening, I registered Phoenix Design Group LLC with anonymous ownership through a Delaware corporation. The name felt appropriate, a new entity rising from the ashes of an outdated one. I created a business plan targeting a complete acquisition, within 6 months focusing on 3 strategies: securing key staff, approaching main suppliers with better terms, and attracting Thompson's client base with modernized services. I reached out to investors I'd worked with before, presenting the opportunity as a chance to revitalize a legacy luxury brand. The current management is out of touch, I explained. With updated systems and design direction, we could double revenue within 2 years. 3 investors committed funds, trusting my analysis and track record. I deliberately kept David in the dark. This wasn't just business anymore. It was personal. Each dismissive comment, each undermining action from Eleanor had built to this moment. Did that make my motives impure? Perhaps. But the business case was sound regardless of my personal feelings. Still, doubts plagued me. Late one night, I almost told David everything. He found me at the kitchen table surrounded by spreadsheets. "Working hard?" he asked, placing his hands on my shoulders. I nearly confessed then, but remembered his unwavering defense of his mother and his dismissal of my insights. "Just a new project," I said instead. "Something with potential." I hired a small team reporting directly to Phoenix Design Group, a project manager experienced in digital workflows, a marketing specialist focused on luxury brands, and a headhunter to identify unhappy Thompson employees. We moved carefully, gathering intelligence without revealing our ultimate goal. I documented every instance of Eleanor's business missteps, building a case for why new ownership was necessary. Each time I hesitated, I remembered Eleanor's words at that family dinner, her dismissive glance, the way she'd systematically tried to undermine my marriage. This wasn't just revenge, it was business. And in business, sentiment had no place. The plan was set: approach suppliers first to secure material sourcing, then court key designers, then target clients with innovative proposals that Thompson couldn't match. Finally, when Eleanor was vulnerable, Phoenix would offer a buyout she couldn't refuse. 6 months of careful maneuvering, and Thompson Luxury Interiors would be mine. The night before launching the first phase, I sat alone in our home office, finger hovering over the send button on the initial supplier outreach emails. This was my last chance to back out. Was I crossing a line? Would this destroy my marriage? But then I remembered Eleanor's smirk as she said I'd never be good enough, and David's silence beside me. I deserved better. I pressed send. The first letter from Phoenix Design Group arrived at Thompson Luxury Interiors 3 weeks later. The offer was reasonable but not generous, a starting point for negotiations. Eleanor's response came through back channels. Not interested at any price. As expected. Phase 1 continued. Phoenix approached Thompson's primary fabric supplier, offering to become their biggest client with guaranteed payment terms, something Thompson had failed to maintain. The supplier switched allegiance within a month. Similar arrangements followed with furniture craftsmen, lighting specialists, and artisans who'd grown tired of Eleanor's late payments and exacting demands. Meanwhile, my headhunter identified 2 of Thompson's most talented designers who were frustrated with the company's direction. Phoenix offered them creative freedom, modern tools, and significantly better compensation. They resigned from Thompson the same day, citing creative differences with Eleanor. Eleanor called David that evening, furious. "Someone is systematically poaching my staff and suppliers," she fumed. I pretended to work on my laptop while listening to David try to calm her. "I'm sure it's just market competition, Mom," he soothed. "Maybe it's time to consider some of the changes Sarah suggested." Eleanor's response was loud enough for me to hear across the room. "I don't need advice from your accountant wife." The next phase targeted Thompson's clients. Phoenix Design Group began bidding on projects against Thompson Interiors, offering competitive prices, shorter timelines through digital workflows, and more contemporary design concepts. We won 3 major contracts that would have traditionally gone to Thompson. Simultaneously, I arranged for Phoenix to purchase Thompson's outstanding business loans from banks happy to offload the increasingly risky debt. The combined pressure began to show. Eleanor was now calling David daily, her composure cracking. "She thinks someone is deliberately trying to ruin her," David told me one night. "The business is in trouble, Sarah. She might lose everything." I managed to look appropriately concerned while suggesting, maybe she should consider that buyout offer she mentioned receiving. David shook his head. "She's too proud. Thompson Interiors is her life's work." Behind the scenes, Phoenix continued. Applying pressure. A confidential industry survey sent to former and current Thompson clients revealed widespread dissatisfaction with their outdated approaches. The results, anonymized but damning, were circulated among interior design influencers. Eleanor tried desperately to secure loans from family members, but Arthur insisted on seeing the books first, and promptly advised against throwing good money after bad. When Phoenix's competing bids consistently came in lower for equivalent work, Eleanor began suspecting corporate espionage. The truth was simpler, but more devastating. I understood the market in ways she refused to. The final blow came when the bank called in their loans, demanding payment within 30 days. Eleanor had nowhere to turn. Phoenix Design Group sent a final offer letter, now significantly lower than the original but still allowing her to save face with a creative consultant role. The meeting between Eleanor and Phoenix's representatives, carefully selected to exclude me, lasted 6 hours. Eleanor emerged with the signed paperwork and tear-stained cheeks. When the confirmation arrived in my private email, I felt a complex mix of emotions: vindication, guilt, regret, and triumph swirling together. I'd done it. Thompson Luxury Interiors was now mine. The company Eleanor had insisted I wasn't good enough to comment on was now under my control. The irony wasn't lost on me. As I prepared for the reveal, I wondered if the victory would taste as sweet as I'd imagined, or if the inevitable fallout would make it Pyrrhic. I installed Rebecca Chen, a trusted colleague with turnaround experience, as interim CEO of Thompson Luxury Interiors. The initial company-wide email maintained Eleanor as a figurehead while announcing exciting changes coming. Behind the scenes, I prepared a comprehensive restructuring plan, modernizing everything from design software to client communication processes. For the revelation day, I chose my outfit carefully, a tailored black suit that projected authority without flaunting it. I spent extra time on my appearance, knowing the psychological advantage it would provide. Walking into Thompson Interiors as its owner felt surreal. The receptionist smiled politely, unaware that the Ms. Phillips from Phoenix Design Group she announced was actually Mrs. Thompson. Eleanor was in the main conference room with the design team, reviewing concepts for a project, one they were likely to lose to Phoenix if history was any indicator. Rebecca met me in the hallway. "Everyone's assembled as requested," she confirmed. "Eleanor thinks this is a meeting about a potential collaboration between Thompson and Phoenix." I took a deep breath and entered the room. Eleanor looked up, momentary confusion crossing her face before her society mask slipped back into place. "Sarah, what are you doing here? This is a private business meeting." I placed my briefcase on the table. "Actually, Eleanor, this meeting is about the future of Thompson Luxury Interiors under its new ownership." Her expression froze. "What are you talking about?" I removed the acquisition papers from my briefcase and slid them across the table. Phoenix Design Group has acquired Thompson Luxury Interiors. As the founder and CEO of Phoenix, I wanted to personally introduce myself to the team. The room fell silent. Eleanor's face drained of color as she stared at the documents. Recognition dawning. This is impossible," she whispered. I addressed the design team calmly. "I'll be meeting with each department this week to discuss our new direction. For now, please give Mrs. Thompson and me the room." Once alone, Eleanor's composure shattered. "You manipulated me. Used my own son against me. This is unconscionable." I remained calm. "This was a business decision, Eleanor. Thompson Interiors was failing due to outdated practices and resistance to necessary changes. Phoenix acquired it at market value." "Market value?" she spat. "After you deliberately undermined my company." I met her gaze steadily. "I simply offered better terms to suppliers who weren't being paid on time, hired talented designers who weren't being valued, and presented clients with the modern options they were requesting." Her hands trembled as she pointed at me. "You did this for revenge? Because you've always been jealous of my relationship with David." "No, Eleanor," I countered. "I did this because when I tried to offer business insights, you told me I'd never be good enough for your family. You judged me by my background rather than my abilities. Now we'll see who's better at business." Eleanor's face crumpled. "David, we'll never forgive you for this. You've destroyed our family." As if on cue, Eleanor's phone rang. David, returning her frantic message from earlier. I heard her broken voice. "David, she's taken everything. Sarah, she's the one behind Phoenix." I returned home that evening to find David waiting, his face a storm of emotions. "Tell me it's not true," he demanded. "Tell me you didn't secretly buy out my mother's company." I set down my briefcase. "It's true. Phoenix Design Group is mine, and yes, we acquired Thompson Interiors." The argument that followed was nuclear. David paced our living room, alternating between disbelief and fury. "How could you do this? Behind my back? My mother is devastated." "The same mother who told me I'd never be good enough?" I countered. "Who undermined me at every turn. who you never defended. David raked his hands through his hair. This isn't about my mother's comments. This is about you deliberately targeting her company out of spite. This was a sound business decision. I insisted. Thompson Interiors was failing. The acquisition saved jobs and preserved the brand. Don't pretend this was just business, David shouted. You used me to get information about my family's company. Was that your plan all along? Was any part of our marriage real? The accusation felt like a slap. How dare you, I whispered. I have loved you completely, but I refuse to be treated as less than by your mother while you stand by and let it happen. David shook his head, grabbing his keys. I can't even look at you right now. I'm going to my parents. I need to think. As the door slammed behind him, I sank onto the sofa, the victory I'd imagined feeling hollow. I allowed myself exactly 10 minutes to cry before wiping my eyes and opening my laptop. I had a company to save, regardless of the personal cost. If my marriage couldn't survive this, perhaps it wasn't as strong as I'd believed. Still, as I worked through the night, on transition plans, the empty space beside me felt like an accusation. Despite the personal turmoil, I appeared at Thompson Interiors, now officially Thompson Phoenix Design Group, at 8 a.m. sharp the next day. The staff watched me warily as I toured each department, Rebecca at my side. Changes will be implemented. Gradually, I assured them. Your jobs are secure, but our processes will be modernized. In my temporary office, ironically, a small conference room rather than Eleanor's spacious corner office, which I left untouched, I met with department heads individually. Some were receptive, others, loyal to Eleanor, were coldly professional. Eleanor herself arrived at 11 a.m., wearing what I recognized as her battle armor, a perfectly tailored Chanel suit, not a hair out of place. She swept past my office without acknowledgement. Initially, Eleanor attempted to undermine the transition. She told longtime clients that quality would suffer under new management and hinted to staff that the changes were temporary. I addressed these challenges directly, calling a company-wide meeting. I understand change is difficult, I acknowledged, but Thompson Interiors has been losing market share for years. Our goal is to honor the Thompson legacy of quality while bringing the company into the modern era. I outlined clear expectations and performance metrics, concepts foreign to Eleanor's personalized management style. The first major test came 3 weeks into the transition. A significant client, the renovation of a historic Fifth Avenue apartment, required presentation of initial design concepts. Eleanor assumed she would lead the presentation as always. The evening before, I reviewed the concepts her team had prepared. They were beautiful but conventional, missing the client's stated desire for traditional elements blended with contemporary functionality. I stayed up all night with 2 of our designers, creating an alternative concept that honored the apartment's history while incorporating smart home technology and sustainable materials. At the presentation, I began by introducing Eleanor as the creative vision behind Thompson's legacy. She accepted the acknowledgement with a regal nod. Then I surprised her by adding, and now I'd like to present an alternative concept that builds on Mrs. Thompson's foundation while addressing the specific modern elements requested. The clients loved the alternative concept, choosing it unanimously. Eleanor sat rigid through the rest of the meeting. Afterward, she cornered me in the hallway. You humiliated me deliberately, she hissed. I kept my voice level. I respected your experience by presenting your concept first. The clients made their choice based on which design better met their needs. Eleanor left early that day. Later, Arthur called me. Eleanor told me what happened, he said, his voice tired, but she also mentioned that your design was innovative, that it might actually work better for the space. It was the first crack in Eleanor's facade, a private admission that perhaps her approach wasn't always best. Meanwhile, David maintained his distance. He stayed at his parents' home but called regularly to check on practical matters. After 6 weeks of separation, he texted, "Can we talk?" In person. He arrived at our brownstone looking tired and uncertain. We sat at opposite ends of the sofa, the space between us a physical manifestation of our estrangement. "How's your mother?" I asked. David sighed. "Struggling, but also changing, I think. Dad says she's actually started looking at the company reports you send home." We talked for hours that night, laying bare the painful patterns that had shaped our marriage. I should have stood up to her, David admitted finally. Every time she undermined you, my silence was a kind of betrayal. And I should have told you about Phoenix, I acknowledged. But I was afraid you'd choose her side again. We didn't resolve everything that night, but David stayed. We have a lot to work through, he said as we lay in bed. Not touching, but closer than we'd been in weeks. But I'm willing to try if you are. The first family dinner after the acquisition was excruciating. Eleanor was subdued, her usual commanding presence diminished. Arthur carried much of the conversation, asking pointed questions about the business that allowed me to explain our vision without sounding boastful. Eleanor watched me throughout dinner, her expression unreadable. As we prepared to leave, she said stiffly, "The Hendersons' project looks acceptable. The integration of smart lighting was appropriate." From Eleanor, this qualified as high praise. Walking to the car, David squeezed my hand. "Did my mother just compliment your decision?" I nodded, surprised myself. "I think she did." The power shift was subtle, but unmistakable. The woman who had once declared I'd never be good enough was now acknowledging my business decisions. It wasn't forgiveness or acceptance. We had miles to go before that. But it was respect. And perhaps that was a better foundation than anything we'd had before. 1 year after the acquisition, Thomson Phoenix Design Group celebrated its most profitable quarter in 15 years. The company headquarters had been renovated, ironically, using an innovative design that maintained classic elements while incorporating modern functionality. Standing at the podium during our anniversary event, I surveyed the room filled with employees, clients, and industry partners. "Success is never a solo achievement," I began. "Thomson Design has a 40-year legacy of excellence, and Eleanor, Thomson's vision established the foundation of quality and attention to detail that remains our hallmark." Eleanor, seated at the front table beside Arthur and David, looked up in surprise. I hadn't told her I would acknowledge her publicly. "While we've implemented new technologies and approaches, we've maintained the core values that made this company special," I continued. "That balance of tradition and innovation will guide us moving forward." After the formal presentations, Eleanor approached me at the bar. "That was generous of you," she said, studying her wine glass. "Truthful," I corrected. "The Thomson name still means something in this industry. My goal was never to erase that legacy." She nodded slowly. "The Chambers project turned out well. The integration of traditional moldings with the contemporary lighting was effective." Over the following months, Eleanor and I established a tentative professional relationship. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, through a high-profile historical renovation. The client wanted to preserve the 19th century architectural details while creating a thoroughly modern living space, a perfect metaphor for our company's evolution. I asked Eleanor to collaborate directly with me on the concept. "Your knowledge of historical detail is unmatched," I acknowledged. "I want to learn from you while contributing my own perspective." The project became a turning point. Eleanor's expertise in classical design elements complemented my understanding of contemporary needs and technologies. The result was genuinely collaborative and won industry recognition. One evening, working late at the office, Eleanor brought me a cup of coffee, a small gesture but significant from a woman who had once expected others to serve her. "I've been thinking about the Sullivan proposal," she said, sitting across from me. We discussed design options for 30 minutes before Eleanor said abruptly, "I was wrong about you." I looked up, startled. "I judged you by your background, not your abilities," she continued. "I was afraid." "Afraid?" I echoed. Eleanor's perfectly manicured nails tapped against her coffee cup. "David was always mine. Then suddenly there was you, and you were capable, independent, strong-willed." She smiled faintly. "Rather like me, though I wouldn't have admitted it then." It wasn't a full apology, but from Eleanor this acknowledgement was monumental. 2 weeks later, I called Eleanor into my office. "I'd like to offer you the position of creative director," I said, sliding the contract across my desk. "Not as a courtesy, but because you've earned it. Your work on the Sullivan project proved your value to this company." Eleanor's surprise was evident. "You're offering me a promotion?" I nodded. "Your institutional knowledge combined with your willingness to adapt makes you uniquely qualified. This isn't charity, Eleanor. It's business. She studied me for a long moment before signing the contract. Sarah Thompson, she said, using my married name deliberately, I believe we may finally understand each other. At home, David noticed the change in our dynamic. You and Mom actually seem to be working well together, he observed one night over dinner. The world must be ending. I laughed. Let's just say we've reached a detente. Our marriage had changed too. David had begun setting boundaries with his mother, no longer automatically taking her side. I told Mom we wouldn't be at Sunday dinner this weekend, he informed me one Friday. I thought we could go to that bed and breakfast in the Berkshires instead, just us. The woman who had once felt she needed to prove herself worthy of the Thompson name now recognized her own value. The acquisition that began as revenge evolved into something more meaningful, a genuine business success, and surprisingly, a path to mutual respect with Eleanor. The final proof came during a client meeting when a potential customer questioned my background. Before I could respond, Eleanor interjected, Sarah Thompson built this company's current success through vision and determination. She represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking you want designing your home. Later, she explained her intervention simply, it was the truth. And besides, no one gets to criticize my daughter-in-law except me. It wasn't conventional affection, but from Eleanor, it was significant progress. Looking back on the journey from that first dinner where Eleanor declared I'd never be good enough, to becoming her boss, to eventually earning her professional respect, I realized something important. The best revenge wasn't making Eleanor work for me. It was discovering my own worth regardless of her opinion. That night, curled beside David in our home that was finally truly ours, no longer subtly rearranged by Eleanor during surprise visits, I reflected on how far we'd all come. Penny for your thoughts? David murmured sleepily. Just thinking. That sometimes the long way around is the only way to reach the right destination, I replied. The woman who entered the Thompson family feeling inadequate had found her power not through titles or revenge, but through staying true to her abilities and values. Eleanor had been wrong. I was good enough, not because I'd proven it to her, but because I'd finally, completely believed it myself. Have you ever dealt with difficult in-laws or felt underestimated in your career? What would you have done in Sarah's situation? Tried to win Eleanor over differently, walked away, or taken a similar approach? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Remember, sometimes the greatest victory isn't proving others wrong, but discovering your own strength in the process. Thank you for listening to my story today. If it resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing with anyone who might need a reminder of their own worth. Until next time, remember that you are always good enough, regardless of who fails to see it.